stablecoins on Lightning could be very, very interesting. And once again, I don't want to necessarily go down the rabbit hole of whether L2s are good or whether L2s aren't good for Bitcoin or whatever. But I think the technology and the use case will win out over like what people want and what people don't want from a philosophical lens. Because today it's really just more theory than practice. They go to Mexico and they go to a resort and they're behind a 10-foot wall and everyone's speaking English and the water is clean. And they're like, yeah, fix Bitcoin, fix the world. But you've really actually never seen hyperinflation. You've never seen some of the problems that maybe actually Bitcoin could fix. Cash is definitely on its way out. And I think not only is it technologically aligned with the trend, but it's also generationally aligned with like millennials and Gen Z becoming the larger parts of society. You could have 1 million Tesla shares and be lost in the jungle of Colombia and be trying to interact with people. They're not going to find it valuable. If you have Bitcoin, you have a much likelier chance to not only have the value of like the international stock or the global stock, which is Bitcoin, but then people may be like, okay, all right, I'll take that. And then you can take my car and like, save yourself. So I just say it's a stock that you can spend and it's the best stock we have.
Hi, Jarrett. How are you doing? Everything fine on your end?
Yeah, everything is great. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. And with every new guest on my show, I'm just curious on what's your background, what are you doing in Bitcoin, and especially, what is the most, like, why are you excited about Bitcoin? Like, this is, I'm always like, there's so many different angles, like why people are excited about it. And I'm always like really curious on that one.
Yeah. Wow. Where to start? So I think the reason why I was originally excited about, I'm still excited about, but I think reasons why I'm excited today have constantly evolved. Like today, I'm going to shout out the date if that's okay. I know that sometimes when you record and when you publish is different, but yesterday, I should say, was October 20th. And yesterday, the world kind of shut down because AWS went down. And I think it was like a moment where you realize how centralized and dependent a lot of systems are and how that can be dangerous. And I live in Colombia and I go to the same lunch spot every day, so I don't have to think about it. I go there, they know me, I order, whatever the meal is of the day. It's like $4 or $5. It's absolutely delicious. And I go yesterday, and before I sat down, they're like, hey, just so you know, you can't use your credit card. I normally use Apple Pay or whatever I use, credit card or Apple Pay. And they're like, yeah, you can't use that today. And now, luckily, I know them well enough that I just put it on my tab and then I cancel, I pay, whenever I can. But I'm just looking at that and I'm like, man, Bitcoin Lightning would be absolutely perfect, right? Because Bitcoin Lightning can be off chain and you don't even necessarily need an internet connection, right? People have been using Bitcoin Lightning, especially in the developing world or emerging markets, whatever you want to say, for a long time to solve this. Hey, we're offline issue, but we still need to transact and have commerce. So I think that's something that I'm very interested today, more about like the currency aspect of it. And then I got into it in 2017. And I think that when people get into Bitcoin, they have like 2 dates. One is when they first buy it. Well, there's probably 3. One is when they first hear about it. I heard about it in like 2014, and then I was just joking about it because like, that's stupid. That's never going to work. And then 2017, when I like bought $200 worth at an ATM. And then there's like 2021, I read the Bitcoin Standard and I was like, okay, now I understand this thing. But in 2017, when I got in, I was just blown away the fact that like I could send you money. You're in Europe and I am in South America, for example, and I could just send you money, because if you've ever had to send money internationally, it is absolutely horrid, absolutely horrid. And at that time, I was working for a nonprofit in Central America, and as many people do who work in stateside, work in stateside nonprofits that have international programming and services, when they go abroad, they'll literally go take out from the organization's bank account $9,990. And they shove it somewhere, and then they cross the border, and then they go to a bank in that country, and then they deposit it, so they avoid the 2 or 3 day banking times that, at least depending upon the bank, can exist. So at the time, I was like, holy crap, this is a more efficient way to move money around the world, which I still think, but I also think now, on like a very peer-to-peer, it's a much better way to just transact money in real time, especially if Amazon Web Services is down and the internet seems broken.
It's always fascinating for me how fragile our systems are. Like if you think about like our cash system, like our digital cash system. So basically like the euro, the dollar, the yen, like all of those. But then also the internet infrastructure, which, yeah, yesterday was signal down for like 2-3 hours. That's the only thing that I really noticed. I can survive. Almost everyone that I have on Signal, I also have on Telegram, so I don't care. But with money, it's a lot more worrying and a lot more harmful in the long run. And I'm so shocked when you look back at like what development we already had, how much we already invested in all those infrastructures, and then the fact that we are still so fragile as a society, as Earth population, basically. And the second thing that you not notice is so true. The digital money feels very analog. Like I have, funny enough, one of my editors in Colombia, one of my family design in El Salvador. In Colombia, I pay him mostly in fiat, and it takes about 10-15 euros from my side and 10-15 euros from his side. And in El Salvador, I do the same thing, but in Bitcoin. It just costs me like 80 cents, or maybe sometimes it's a little higher, $1 or $2, and it's on chain. We don't even do with Lightning. We do on chain and like $1-2, and it's fine. I'm like, yeah, $2 is nothing against $20. I'm gladly paying that. And so if you look at those systems, I'm like, the digital version of euro, yen, dollars, whatever, still feels not even digital. Like you have the disadvantage of digital, but not the advantages of digital, kind of. And with Bitcoin, it kind of flips that on this. It's huge, and I think yesterday was a huge reminder of that.
Yeah, and it's really interesting to hear that you have a editor in Colombia, because getting money in and out of Colombia is a nightmare. And actually, I have my own podcast, and I was talking to Jesse Schrader from Amboss. It's a Bitcoin Lightning. They do everything with Bitcoin Lightning, and his co-founder. We didn't even realize till we were on the episode, just as we didn't realize now until we're on the episode that there's a Colombia connection. But his co-founder is actually from Bogota, and that's where I live. And we were just talking about how difficult it is to get money in and out of Colombia, and part of this is because getting like dollars in and out of Colombia has been historically difficult because of the drug trade, right? After it blew up in like the 80s and the 90s, the US was like, holy crap, we need to have like really strict controls around like how dollars go in and out of Colombia. Like we need to fully understand what's going on there. And one thing I'm really bullish on, like two things when it comes to like blockchain backed digital assets. One of them is Bitcoin, obviously. I've got my Bitcoin shirt on. I'm here on the pod talking to you. And then the other is stablecoins. I think that like stablecoins help liquidity in the background, and stablecoins keep a lot of like the entire crypto market cap going. But I think in the future, like Bitcoin and stable coins are absolutely going to be paramount to how the world works. So my hope is that for Colombia, or getting stuff in and out of South America, or going from South America to Europe, Europe to Asia, Asia to Africa, Africa to the States, whatever that is, ideally there's Bitcoin, what's being built right now, which I think is very interesting. And some people don't like L2s on Bitcoin. Some people love L2s on Bitcoin. But from a technological standpoint, having the biggest permissionless decentralized network, and then having basically the L2 of that, which is Bitcoin Lightning, and then having stable coins on that, I think gets around KYC, and I think it's great, and it could be an amazing way for you to be able to pay your editor in Colombia eventually when that's set up. And then they both have, because obviously not only is it the on-ramp, but it's the off-ramp. The off-ramp can be really, really, really brutal. But more and more banks globally are figuring out, they're starting to have their like their crypto, or their tokenized, or their blockchain products. I don't know what word you want to use, but I do think that stable coins on L2s or stable coins on Lightning, Bitcoin Lightning, I just think are going to absolutely revolutionize. And I can totally foresee a future where, you come down and you're hanging out down here and you're paying for stuff on Lightning with the digital dollar or the digital euro, whichever one is going to rise to the top. I think it's probably the dollar, since it's still the global reserve currency. I think that will still be the case. I'm a hybrid theory guy. I think, everyone has storing all their value in Bitcoin and then using Bitcoin Lightning to transact. But I think on top of that, if people don't want the quote, using air quotes, volatility of Bitcoin, stable coins on Lightning could be very, very interesting. And once again, I don't want to necessarily go down the rabbit hole of whether L2s are good or whether L2s aren't good for Bitcoin or whatever. But I think the technology and the use case will win out over like what people want and what people don't want from a philosophical lens. Because today it's really just more theory than practice.
It's really interesting because the Bitcoin community is so split on that issue of like what is the future of fiat looking like. We almost all agree on like the future of Bitcoin, to a certain extent, of course. But the future of fiat is so heavily, like, not that heavily discussed, but like it's very different when you talk with different people. There's a cohort of saying like it will always be around. There's always some sort of like government token or like however you want to call it. Then there's the people that say like, oh, like it will be gone in 2 years. It's very hard for me because I think like the major trend that we are seeing is almost undeniable, that like smaller, weaker fiat currencies are crashing into bigger, stronger fiat currencies, like especially with stablecoins. This whole trend will just like accelerate from there. But then it's the question of like, what if Bitcoin reaches a market cap of 400, 500 trillion dollars? Obviously that won't happen quick, but what if this happens? Is there any incentive or any reason why anyone is actually using fiat at that point? And what does this future really look like? So medium term, short term, like I think stablecoins are huge, especially for places like Colombia. But I'm just long term, and I'm thinking like 50, 100, 200 years out. Like I'm very like divided on like, will there always be a government token? Will those weird digital borders always kind of be around?
First of all, I love that you're calling fiat a government token. I've not heard that at least recently, and now I'm going to steal that, and I'll be sure to quote you. Yeah, I think when I say the hybrid theory, Lynn Alden's, it's something that she's talked about, and I think that over the next 15 to 20 years, which while is a long way away, will go by in an absolute blink of an eye. I think that's where you still have the dollar hanging on. I mean, I think that that's one of the things that like the US is kind of seeing right now, that they're like passing all this stablecoin legislation to basically be able to demonetize or continue to devalue the dollar and get it in more hands. I do think once Bitcoin, like let's live in the world where Bitcoin hits the 400 to 500 trillion, as you said. Right now, people are saying, there's like $900 trillion of assets. And I've heard that, okay, if let's live in the world where Bitcoin's 400, 500 trillion, it's not going to be then 4 out of 9 or 5 out of 9 total trillion, because the trillion will have also grown as the US has to pay off debt, as other things happen, as honestly, the financialization just continues to happen of the fiat system, where they just make, for every dollar, there's $10 in existence type thing. So I think that's where you have like 2,500 trillion, which I think we're getting into quadrillions, or 2.5 quadrillion. Anyways, a crap ton of government tokens are going to be floating out there. Let's say Bitcoin is somewhere around 20 to 25% of them. Today, it's less than 1%, right? That to me feels like then we're in the world where you are using Bitcoin to store your generational value. My nephew, who's 3 years old, when he's then at that age, maybe he's at my age and he has kids in like 50 years or whatever, I think then he stores the generational value on mainnet, and then he's transacting probably on Lightning, and there's a premium. Basically, if you want to use government tokens, people are going to charge you more because they just don't want them. And there's going to be a really, like, in that world, unless the government token, I assume all the government tokens then are all digital and they're all on their own, like permissionless, like network. Like the government's basically figured out we have to just let dollars flow as easily as we let cash flow today. Otherwise, people aren't going to use it. But it's a really interesting one. But I do think, yeah, over a long enough period of time, sure. If you're getting out 50 years and there's 400, 500 trillion dollars in Bitcoin, then yeah, then you're looking at L2s, and then that's where you and I are going to go out and get dinner, and dinner is going to cost 400, 500 sats for dinner, right? And because you have even a tenth of a Bitcoin, which is something that's the drum I'm always beating, right? Because that's still 10 million Bitcoin. Then I think, that's where you're beyond parity, at least to the dollar. And that's where if you have 0.1 Bitcoin, then yeah, you're pretty good for life.
Do you have a theory for like the tenth of a Bitcoin? Like, well, like I of course it's always arbitrary data and arbitrary like picking a number, but I find it always interesting and curious how people come to a specific number.
For me, it's just a round number. And I just think that it looks like a 0.1, like a tenth of a Bitcoin. And then I had an episode, probably went the most viral on my channel. And it wasn't focused at all on the price because I don't know what the price is going to be, right? The price of Bitcoin right now, it is what it is. If you're a long-term investor, you're just like buying, DCAing, you're not even looking. And honestly, the longer you're in Bitcoin, the more excited you are when the price goes down. Because when the price goes up, it means you're getting less Bitcoin for government tokens that you're putting into the machine. I was just looking at scarcity. And my whole philosophy is that money moves towards opportunity, but wealth moves towards scarcity. And so when you look at just how many people, even today, how many wallets and, addresses have 0.1 Bitcoin, you're talking about like no amount of human beings, right? It's no one, right? They can almost fit in a couple of like European football stadiums, right? The Camp Nou just got renovated in Barcelona, and they can now put 105 or 110,000 bodies in there. And, you're filling up like 10 or 12 or, I don't know, 13 or 14 Camp Nous maybe. And then you have to take into account that a lot of those addresses, multiple people own multiple addresses. So you can't really figure it out. But I just look at the scarcity. And right now, the amount of people that own 0.1 Bitcoin. They're very, very few. And then the amount of people, I have the analogy of the ice cream truck, and the ice cream truck is speeding up, and every 100 yards, it's speeding up even further. So while you try to DCA to get, if you start today and you DCA to get, and you're to get 0.1 Bitcoin, and you're an average human being on this planet, you're probably not going to get there. Because the average human being on this planet just doesn't make a lot of money. And right now, 0.1 Bitcoin is $10,000. And $10,000 in most emerging markets or most of the global south is the amount of money you make in 3 or 4 years of your life. If you don't spend any money else on anything else and you just put it into chasing the ice cream truck. So I don't even look at it from a fiat percent. I'm just looking at like how scarce it is. And so, yeah, that's to me, that's like my theory. I'm just focused on scarcity.
I love that. And there's a few things that you said beforehand that I kind of want to touch on. You said stable coins, and for me, it's really interesting because America, in specific, the USA, is very much against CBDCs. And it's like a very like non-starting topic. But then they're very big on stable coins. And I don't really get what is different between those, because it's centrally controlled digital currencies. And like for me, as CBDCs and stablecoins are kind of like not the same thing, about like, it's like, I don't really get the difference there.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the CBDC, right, the central bank, I think that's different for every U.S. citizen to have a wallet that the central bank approves you to have. Like, okay, Robin, you're a U.S. citizen, you're going to sign up for this thing, and you're going to actually use your social security number, which is a number that normally is, as a U.S. citizen, you don't tell anyone. Like, you want that hidden off the grid, but this is how you actually like sign into your thing, and you don't necessarily maybe even own the keys, but maybe to the wallet. But the fact that like then the central bank can give you, for me, this is me, right? This is the way I look at it. The fact that the central bank can say, okay, Robin, great. We're going to give out stimulus checks because we basically have to figure out a UBI because everyone's broke, and AI is taking jobs. Automation's been taking jobs in the US for the past 30 years, and all these things. Okay, so we're going to give you money. The thing I think is dangerous is that that's like a government right to you. The government is then feeding you, and then what they can do is, this may seem hypothetical, but at the same time, I don't think it is. They could say, okay, Robin, you only have 30 days to spend this 1,000 government tokens, 1,000 doll hairs, as I call them. So you have 30 days, and at the end of the 30 days, if you don't spend them, we're going to delete them from your wallet, and you can't move them out of your wallet. You can only send them to other CBDC wallets. I think that is a complete controlled system that the government would have way too much oversight into to see then where you're buying, what you're doing. There's just, for me, one step removed, which is now they have these like main two private companies, which is Tether and Circle, that then have USDC and USDT respectively, that are at least private companies that can push back at some of these things and say, whoa, like let's like, we don't like that. And if you use USDC or USDT on different chains, different L2s or whatever, you can set up the wallet where you own the keys. And it's not KYC'd. I have USDC on Base in my Base wallet back before they were demanding KYC, and you can still set it up today on the Base app. without having KYC. So I think that that's a very, very, very valuable thing. So in some sense, it's kind of like an illusion because yes, the government, at least with Circle, I think Circle was out of Boston, but then they moved to New York when they wanted to before they IPO'd. So yes, the government at any time could go to Circle and say, hey, you know what? We want to know what Robin and Jarrett are doing. Right. They're two of our citizens. Like, we need to figure that out. I'm sure that they could subpoena Circle, but there's that bubble of like private company, or now Circle's a public company, I should say, but there's a bubble of like a separate entity that you would have to subpoena to be able to get our information. I think that's it, but you're not wrong in the sense that, like, yeah, from 30,000 feet, if an alien came down to Earth and you had to explain it, they'd be like, it's one and the same. It's centralized. It's easy to see what happens on chain. But because most of those don't have their own base chains and they're like hopping on, I think that also allows a level where you can move Circle, for example, or USDT on things that aren't KYC. So it's not as like, controlled from a top entity.
But that's a really good point. Because I've never used stablecoins. I do just like Bitcoin. And if someone doesn't take Bitcoin, I just like, try to figure out how to do it with Fiat. And so I have no experience whatsoever from stablecoins, but I just always was thinking like, it's a digital currency. Like, the government can just like go to those private companies and say like, hey, like, give me this thing. But it's a good point that there first is one more layer in there. So it's not directly the central bank having all the control and nobody knows even about it, but they have to actually go to a company and say like, hey, you have to do this. Otherwise, I'll put you in jail. Something like that. And there's at least a human being, or there's at least like some sort of like layer that's a little bit third party in there that gives a little bit small kind of a protection. It's not decentralized at all, but it's like at least like one small layer in there. And one interesting thing that I never thought about is like, there's no KYC, because I do not think you will ever get any digital euro, digital yen, digital dollars without KYC. I think they will always be like 100% KYC'd. And so having stablecoins without KYC is already a step upwards. So like, I guess a stablecoin is a 15% improvement, or like maybe 20%, whatever the thing is, to a CBDC, and a lot better in that regard. Yeah, I get that. I've never looked at those two arguments actually.
Yeah, I mean, and that's just me looking at it, and some other people have shared similar things. And I just think you want to have like the separation of like the more layers you can have away from the government is better. And I do think that if it's built on a smart contract and the government were to have it, the government could totally say, Robin, you have 30 days to spend this $1,000, right? Whereas when the stimulus checks went out in 2020, I think, to US citizens, it was like, do use this money for whatever you want. And like, someone like, my background is actually in international development, and I have my master's in international affairs, and most of my friends work for UNICEF. They work for USAID, but they work around the world, and they're confronting some of the humanity's greatest challenges, if I'm being honest. And one of the things is they work in conditional cash transfer programs, CCT, which is basically, hey, Robin, you are a farmer in Colombia, and in your part of the country, we see a lot of malnutrition. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, hey, if you bring your kids to the school every third Thursday and you have them weigh in and you let us talk to you for 30 minutes about nutrition, and then we're going to give you some rice. All you have to do is kind of like play ball, and we're going to give you some rice, and we're also going to give you some cash, right? Conditional cash transfer. We're going to transfer you cash if you conditionally do some things. You come and weigh your kids, you listen to our nutrition classes, and you let us give you rice, okay? This happens throughout the global south, right? These type of programs, these conditional cash transfer programs. And one of the things that they found in these, just as in any program in the United States, right, where you give people who are on the end of the economic rung financial things, when you give them cash, they're going to spend almost 100% of that and put it right back into the economy. And so it's not like a bad thing to give people money, right? So that's why when the stimulus checks out, it really boosted the economy. Because it all just went back into like the consumer-based economy. And so when I think about the CBDCs, the thing I don't want is that like, hey, you have to use it you have to use it in 30 days, and you can only send it to other CBDC wallets, because then they're just trying to get more and more people on their grid, right? So I think for anything to be cash, because that's like, I'm blanking on the name of the book. I wish I could call it out, but it's one of my favorite Bitcoin books, and it's like talks about digital cash, and that was the revolution, because that is what Bitcoin is. It's like having cash. It's having digital cash before the world. And I know that seems cliche. And if you're listening, you're like, oh man, I've thought about that. But like, have you really traveled around the world and realized you have something in your pocket that every single person on the planet could potentially accept? Once again, some people would be like, oh, that's not mind blowing. But like, seriously, go out and travel. Seriously, go outside the US and try to like figure out currency, because it fucking sucks. Or go outside of, get off the euro or get off whatever major currency, get off the sterling pound. Those like the three that I think are kind of dominating the world. Getting away from what I was saying, CBDCs, though, I think have way too much control. And if it's not a digital cash thing where I get to decide whether I want to save it, whether I want to spend it, whether I want to invest it, I think that it's a problem. And that's also why I think even if there were CBDCs, I don't think that they would survive long in the States. I think people would push back. Like if the government were going to send me in the United States money on a CBDC, I would just say, okay, you're going to send me $1,000. Kind of cool. I'd actually rather not have it than to accept it. And then all of a sudden you get to see where I'm going to put it. I'd just rather not have it. It's $1,000. What you're saying is $1,000 for me to keep you out of my financial life, right? So, yeah, I'm interested that we went down this rabbit hole, because normally Bitcoiners, I feel like you kind of just stay in like sound money, man. It's gonna fix everything.
The most important thing for your Bitcoin journey is not buying Bitcoin, but it's how to keep them. And yes, you have maybe the right tools, but how do you actually go ahead and stick it all together so it's the most secure for you personally? Self-custody is a deeply personalized journey, and the Bitcoin way is helping you exactly finding that correct setup for you personally. They are also helping you with securing your own cybersecurity. And if you want to go one step above all that, you can even get a consultation for a Plan B residency. Go to thebitcoinway.com/Robin and you will get a 30-minute free consultation. I finally and officially mine Bitcoin. This is not just something to stack more Satoshis, but it's most importantly also to support the network. Individual miners are the ones that keep the Bitcoin network decentralized. And by the way, you get KYC free Bitcoin. That's why I use simplemining. I get an actual proper Bitcoin miner. They set it up for me. They repair it if it breaks down. And most importantly, they let me choose the pool and even connect my own full node. I'm completely sovereign and I'm completely in control, and I can sign up with Ocean, no account needed. I just give them a Bitcoin address and then there's mining going on. No KYC, nothing. So if you're ready to mine Bitcoin, go to simplemining.io, tell them you come from Robin, and let's mine Bitcoin together. I want to tell you about something very special to me. It's called Microseed. If you hold your Bitcoin in self-custody, and you should, you know how critical it is to secure your seed phrase. You should not have them on paper. You should not have them on anything else than titanium. With Microseed, you can engrave your 12 or 24 word seed phrase, the entire seed phrase, onto a 1-inch small washer. Yes, just one washer. All 24 words on that one washer. You can hide that thing everywhere. And even better, you don't need to buy a new kit every time you have to get a new wallet. You can make unlimited backups, because Microseed is not selling the washer. Microseed is selling the device that stamps the washer. So you get the full kit with the device, with the washers, with the hammer, with everything you need to get started today. And you can make with that unlimited amount of backups. Go now to microseed.io. Again, that's microseed.io to get your last backup tool you ever need.
Oh yeah, I wanted to bring that up also later with like why Bitcoin doesn't fix anything, but not everything. And it's really interesting because I think we do have sometimes almost like a religious belief of saying like, oh, like Bitcoin is doing this and this and that, and like it will cure cancer and all of that. But I want to stick for just a moment on that, because I had just yesterday with a non-Bitcoiner some interesting discussions about how he's like, I'm so big on physical cash. I always want to pay in cash. And he has all this big distrust in all the digital things. And I basically said to him, I love that you are in physical cash, because this means that you're a freedom fighter. But you are fighting an uphill battle that you won't be winning. The world moves digital, and you don't have a decision power in that. The physical cash is gone in very quick amount. Like I don't know like what exactly the years is, or if it's like 5, 10, or like 50 years, but it is gone at some point. We can see clearly the trend. At some point, it will be such a small percentage of the overall volume that they will just be easily saying, hey, the physical cash is like very bad for the environment. It costs us a lot of money. We have to save, and all of like 50 other reasons, and then they will just like stop it, and then you have a grace period of a few years, and then physical cash is gone. And so what I always tell people that are distrusting of everything digital, saying like the world moves digital and you have no choice, and the only choice you have is within digital. And within digital, there is as I call them, government tokens, stablecoins, CBDCs, like all of them. And then there's Bitcoin. And this is for me the only real decision that you actually have. And so this, I got to like 2-3 people that already like kind of woke up with that of like, yeah, like it seems like kind of inevitable that like we get rid of the physical cash aspect, even though I love those people. And they even on the comments sometimes saying like, oh, like, I only have gold and physical cash because like everything digital is from the CIA and they know everything. And I'm like, you are a Bitcoiner, but you don't like digital things. So like there has to be something. So I just wanted to put that in there because it's so important to know that digital is the way forward if you want it or not.
Yeah, I think it's Sweden. Is Sweden the country? That's the one in my head, and I saw a video on it. But is Sweden the country that has already outlawed cash? There's I want to say one of the like Sweden, Denmark, or Norway, but I think it's Sweden has already said like, dude, no more cash. Is that right? Do you know?
I can quickly look it up, but like Sweden would be there's also Estonia, who is really digital, and Estland, and like there's a few of those countries that are all in the same region in Europe, in the Northern Europe.
Yeah,
and even in Austria, even though we have a weird law that you actually have to accept cash because of the national currency. Yeah. But actually, there are a lot of places that don't accept cash anymore. Like there's, for example, the best soccer team or football team in Austria, Red Bull Salzburg. If you go in the stadium, you can only pay with card. Like that's the only thing you can do. There's like a lot of places where it's already there. I don't know if there's like a country of that. That would be new.
Yeah, if you want to look that up, I think it's Sweden, but I do believe that there will be a moment when cash becomes, I don't want to say illegal, but I actually think that there'll be a premium where it will be like, hey, if you want to buy this apple, it's $1, but if you want to buy it with cash, it's $1.05. Because now that means we have to take it and somebody physically has to go to the bank and deposit it. So we're putting a 5% surcharge on it. And I think that could be interesting. The other thing is this whole change of like the cash, a cashless world going into more digital totally dovetails with the boomers coming and going, right? The boomer generation is the last generation who's really thinks about money in the sense of like, I get a check from my work, they mail a check to my house, or I take a check home on Friday. I go to the bank, I wait in line on a Friday, I put it into my bank, and then I take some cash out and I walk around with that. Most boomers now, they're obviously past that, but that's probably the last generation where they think cash is something that they need. Most of my friends, when we walk around now, I mean, I just have my like phone and I'm paying with like, tap to pay essentially. So we're already there. Like there's no Gen Z kid who's, at least in my opinion that I know, who's like super excited about cash. It's gross. It's dirty. A lot of times they don't have like the change to give you. And the US is even, I think, starting to not produce pennies anymore because they're realizing like, it costs 3 cents to produce a 1 cent penny type thing. So cash is definitely on its way out. And I think not only is it technologically aligned with the trend, but it's also generationally aligned with like millennials and Gen Z becoming the larger parts of society as boomers, transition, if you will.
I couldn't find anything. I mean, there are heavy cash restrictions in most of the countries. They usually have like I don't know, 1,000 euros or like 10,000 euros or 5,000 euros, and everything above that you cannot do in cash. But yeah, I only had 2 minutes. So that might be true. But I think, like if something like that happens, like Sweden, Norwegian, like all of those places are very prone to that. I mean, Sweden had the first central bank of the world. Like if I got that right, I think they had has the oldest central banks in the world. So they might be also a good place to like completely get rid of physical cash the first time. Would fit in the history, I guess.
Yeah, and I think it will happen obviously in countries that are just smaller. You know, Norway, Denmark, Sweden, Iceland. These are just like Iceland has like 400,000 people. If they want to do it, like they can make it happen a lot quicker and it'll be easier. And they could even have government officials go out and like support people, maybe support the elderly or support other people who need help in like the transition. But when you look at a country like the United States, 350 million people, and it's such a large landmass, and trying to figure that out, I think it's more difficult. But that's where, you know, if it were a communist country, if it were something like China, China can just say, okay, this is what we're doing now. You're on board, or you're like going to jail type thing. I mean, that's where I do think the digital yuan will be way more prevalent, not only across China, but then with its trading partners in the emerging markets before the US figures that out. But once again, I do think stablecoins are going to really start to play a massive role in how money is moved around the world, both I want to say legally and illegally, right? For me, it's not cash unless you can do illegal stuff with it, right? Because that means it's not KYC'd, and, you know, the Big Brother or the government can't look at it. That's kind of one of the ways I look at it. I'm not at all banging the drum that you should use stuff for illicit. Like, we know what happens, right? We have Bitcoiners. We have the guy who went away to jail for creating the marketplace where then illicit things could happen. That wasn't his intention. So anyway, but I don't think it's digital cash or physical cash, digital cash, excuse me, until you can, you know, maybe do something you're not supposed to do with it.
How do you actually look at the world right now? Because Bitcoin is there as an alternative. It's almost like the exit valve that kind of shows. I often compare it with social media, where once Elon Musk was big on not censoring people, all of a sudden, like Mark Zuckerberg tried to do the same thing, and it's like, oh, interesting, because there's a competition now. And the same thing is kind of interesting also to see in digital currencies, where if those who kind of censor things, they kind of trying to control people, see that there's an alternative with Bitcoin and people can just get in there, it might actually make the digital alternatives, the digital government tokens, better in a way, if you know what I mean.
No, I don't. Say something like, make the digital government tokens better. What do you mean? Easier to transact or easier to hold?
They would be more careful to do stupid stuff with that, of having weird laws of like, you can only transact a certain amount of time. You have to spend it within 30 days, because there's a digital alternative with Bitcoin where people say, hey, like, this is a digital thing. Like, why don't I just use Bitcoin if I have so many restrictions with the digital euro?
Okay, yeah, I got you. So, you know, the idea of Bitcoin proliferation forces the TradFi digital system to basically say, we have to compete or we're going to die type thing. I think that is far, far, far away, because even the Bitcoiners that I know, we're not normally transacting in Bitcoin, because at least if you're stateside and for like the Bitcoin that's KYC'd, if you move it from a wallet and it goes to another wallet and the government can see that, then it becomes a taxable event. So if I'm going to send my buddy, even though we're both Bitcoiners, and I'm just going to send him, you know, something through Venmo or something through Cash App, another third party centralized app where I'm not worried about any tax exposure because I can just use cash. And I think right now Bitcoin's totally in a store of value period. But once it becomes more of the currency and once it becomes something that is moving, I totally think that what you said is absolutely going to happen, where Bitcoin is going to move the goalpost as far as what fiat and what digital TradFi rails are going to need to keep up with. Otherwise, they're going to be seen as obsolete. And I think the more globalized the world becomes, the more that will happen. Because once you try to move US dollars, for example, across borders, it's a nightmare. If you're in the US and you have a US bank account, I'm going to use the US as an example because it's one of the best things I know. But if you're in the US and you have a US bank account, or if you're in Colombia and you have a Colombian bank account, there are really, really good digital products to share either Colombian pesos or US dollars within those systems with other citizens or with people who have those bank accounts. And they're far superior right now than even Bitcoin is. So until that, like that tipping point, I feel like Malcolm Gladwell, right? Until that tipping point, when that tipping point does happen, oh my gosh, I totally believe what you're saying is definitely going to happen, because it will push it. It's exactly what you said. It will be like the censorship thing. We're like, well, I'm less censorship than you are. The thing I will say though is, whether it's censorship or whatever it is on the internet, whenever somebody comes out and they start banging that drum of whatever it is, oftentimes I feel like it can be double speak. As much as Elon has talked about, for example, censorship on X, there has been a lot more censorship on X than I think he would have liked. He's the first one to say, like, I don't think in the same breath he can be honest about that when he banned the kid who was like tracking his plane around the world on that X account, So with anything with like centralized and ego, the more they say something, like the more a leader talks about freedom, the more they're trying to enslave you. Right. But the more a leader to me talks about slavery and how bad that is, the more then they're trying to free me, if that makes sense. And this is just totally 1984 doublespeak type authoritarianism, control over people type philosophy.
Yeah, X is like not a perfect place at all. Like all the things that he promised, I was like first of all, like he delivers slowly. He also over promises on the time. I've watched him very close with Tesla. I was an investor previously, no longer. I watched with Twitter very closely because it was my first big platform, and I'm still my biggest platforms. And so with everything he promised, he's kind of slow on it. And then of course there's still censorship going on. There's still things going on that I don't like. It's just the best of the mainstream platforms, I guess. It's like when you compare to YouTube, maybe Rumble is better. I hear better things from Rumble, but like Twitter and Rumble are very different platforms in itself. But it's interesting when you think about like people that like the same with like greenwashing or like any of the washings, where you talk a lot like, oh, we are free. I mean, this is what the euro is doing. I don't follow Paul and the US dollar that closely, but the ECB has on the Twitter profile written, our mission is to maintain purchasing power. And then if you lay over a graph over the last 20 years or 30 years of like the euro maintaining its purchasing power, it's like, yeah, what have you done? like your mission statement clearly has failed by every single metric. And then she's talking about, oh, it's secure and it's safe and inflation is great and all of that. I'm like, yeah, you're gaslighting yourself, and more importantly, the people. And I'm like, and so I get that double speak. I've never heard the phrase double speak though. It's interesting.
Yeah, that's from, I believe, 1984, George Orwell, where he's just talking about, obviously that's like a fictitious book, but it's like whenever someone, it's totally that. I love that. You're like, oh, we're going to maintain purchasing power. Whenever someone comes out and they have that kind of level platform and they're like, we're going to try to do X, Y, or Z, just know they're doing the opposite. Because they're trying to, like, the ECB, they hope in their mind's eye that is their vision, to maintain purchasing power. That's their vision. But normally visions from an organizational standpoint are something actually not attainable. You're going to try to get there, but you're not going to get there. But that's the thing you have to try to sell people through the marketing and the messaging. And so, yeah, it's the same thing with like, the Fed. The Fed's mandate is to basically keep employment really high. And the second that they say that, I'm like, they're going to do the opposite. Right. And we're seeing that right now in the United States, because the employment metrics also in the United States are totally thrown off, because they'll be like, oh, yeah, we have 100% employment. But that doesn't mean that everyone who's employed can live a good life. My father's 80 years old and he's always harping on, well, I think the economy is OK because the employment is fine. I'm like, Dad, some people have 2 to 3 jobs and they still can't pay their rent. Employment for me is no longer a marker of like what is good. Right. And if an economy is healthy because of the fiat system.
It's crazy. I just pulled it up for people because I couldn't believe it when I first saw it, because usually like central banks are doing something like job security and like weird things that you're like, you could still argue. But this is amazing. they're writing the European Central Bank is a central bank for Europe's single currency, which is false because in Europe there are many other currencies. Like for example, I was just in Bulgaria and they still have their Bulgarian currencies also, but like of course euro is also widely accepted there, but they do prefer the Bulgarian. So like this is weirdly enough a wrong statement. And then its main task is to maintain the euro's purchasing power. And I'm like, so it's like if I make a comedian European Central Bank Twitter account, I would write that in there because it's really funny for me. So when I first saw that a few weeks ago, I was like, are they kidding? Like everyone can just pull up a chart of the purchasing power losing of Europe and they know that's BS.
Yeah, I had never seen that before, but it's totally the double speak. So if they're saying they're going to maintain purchasing power, just know they know that they are losing purchasing power, you know?
Yeah, that's a good one. Now I want to talk about the thing you brought up with like Bitcoin. Bitcoin fixes this, and there's a lot of interesting things in there. I just saw when I saw on Twitter that Bitcoin Amsterdam is currently hosting a space where they say "fix the money, fix the world." So like literally write that meme there. Why isn't that true, or in what sense is that true?
Yeah, you had asked before we hopped on, hey, what's something you want to talk about? And I'm like, this whole fix the world, fix Bitcoin, fix the world. I do actually philosophically believe that. I think if you fix Bitcoin, then you will slowly fix the world or maybe quickly fix the world, right? If everyone were on a Bitcoin standard, I think that would be better. One of the reasons why I'm really bullish into Bitcoin is because like I want world peace. Sounds cliche. Spent a lot of my life working in projects like looking to attain those things, right? I think human beings, we should be treating each other in a way that we keep the world moving forward and not trying to kill each other, right? So, and I think on a Bitcoin standard, I really like that idea of like, well, war will be so expensive. Why would we do it? But when we can print money to go to war, well, that's how the US spends $300 million a day for 20 years in Afghanistan to then leave. And then a week later, the people who we were trying to take the power from are back in power. Right? If we're on a Bitcoin standard, that would have been too expensive and the taxpayers would have been like, no, we don't want to go to war. Right? But since they don't feel like there's a financial impact on them because we're just printing the money and devaluing their money slowly, they don't see it. Right? So for me, I do think philosophically that's right, but I think that like there's a lot of people stateside, and I'm going to call it the States, and there's a lot of people stateside who have never been abroad. They've never lived abroad. And if they have been abroad, they go to Mexico and they go to a resort and they're behind a 10-foot wall and everyone's speaking English and the water is clean. And they're like, yeah, fix Bitcoin, fix the world. But you've really actually never seen hyperinflation. You've never seen some of the problems that maybe actually Bitcoin could fix, right? You never had to really move money across borders to build a business or do a project or anything. So I think sometimes for me, it's also just kind of like a rub with US Bitcoiners who I know you haven't left Austin, Texas in 5 years, right? And you're just sitting there telling me about how this is going to like change emerging markets and all this stuff. And I'm like, man, you can't really even use Bitcoin in emerging markets if you don't have a bank account, because you need to be able to put fiat into the bank account and then connect to a Bitcoin rail to be able to do it. Because you're not going to use a Bitcoin ATM because there's like 15 to 20% fees on those things. And no one's going to do that who's, economically sane in the head. So I just think sometimes Bitcoin doesn't fix everything. Philosophically, I do think if you fix Bitcoin, you would fix the world. But I think we're a long way away from that. So I think that whole idea is really like more mimetic to me. It's more of a meme than it is anything that's actually like built in reality, because there's so few Bitcoiners that I know they're actually using Bitcoin to actually change the world, I guess. And I don't know. I've just been seeing stuff where I'm just like, oh man, dude, like, come on, And I think for those Bitcoiners who follow good shows like your show, what Bitcoin did when Peter McCormick went down to Argentina, he had this tweet and he got a lot of shit for it. Pardon my Spanish. I don't know if this is a kid-friendly show, but he got a lot of flack for it. And he basically said, look, like, I was just in Argentina. I'm a huge Bitcoiner, but like when people are on the edge of hyperinflation, when they're literally seeing their purchasing power reduced every week by like 6%, if not more daily, he's like, people use whatever. He's like, people were buying stablecoins, they were using XRP, they were using Ethereum, they were using whatever they had to basically create their own economic arc to avoid the flood, which was their purchasing power being lost. And I saw today, before we got on, that Argentina's peso has never been this bad. Since 2008 or 2009, it's down 99.8%. And these are things that like most people in the States don't know about. And I say that I'm calling out the States a little bit because the States is where a lot of Bitcoiners come from, at least the loudest ones in English in the world. And so anyway, sometimes I just see these things and I'm like, come on, man. Like, so part of me wants to have like a summit and bring people down to Colombia and be like, just because I want someone to use Bitcoin, they're unbanked. And in Colombia, this is a weird one, I'm unbanked. So like it's not easy for me to get Bitcoin with my Colombian citizenship, So anyway.
I love that. And there's a few reasons why I loved it. The first of all, like, I don't know if you're aware, but like my girlfriend is Indian, and she's not only Indian, but she's also from a rural area, from a village where it reminds me a lot of like Austria, like 200 years ago, type of a thing. Not as bad, but like you get the picture. And I am very much a brat when it comes to like where I grew up. Like I was very protected. Like I grew up on a farm, like Austrian, like nice family, not rich at all, but like nice middle class. Like we had 2 cars at home. Like both parents worked. We were not at all rich. But we were also not at all poor. Like, especially since I'm like 10 years old. Before it was a little bit different story, but I don't want to make that about my family story. And so I lived up very protected. I always had everything. Like when I wanted to have a PlayStation, when I backed enough after a year, I eventually got it. And so I say that because it's only through my podcast and through my girlfriend that I see a different world. And it shook me to my heart, because you hear those things in like when someone is raising money for charities or like anything like that. But then if someone actually tells you about it and lived through it, no matter being on a podcast, we had like many like crazy stories from like African women, that were almost abused or like in some sort of abused by their husband, and they didn't have even a bank account. And so they secretly stacked for 5 years Bitcoin to flee that relationship. Like there's like real stuff happening. And then I'm like, the Austrian brat that has Bitcoin only on the exchange and doesn't care because he trusts in all institutions, and like they will not get that. And so I just want to bring that in, because like perspective will really shift your viewing on Bitcoin. But I feel like Bitcoiners to a certain extent get it, but especially those like TradFi guys that say Bitcoin is a luxury item and a speculative thing. I think those people I would love to put in those places, because they would really gain something. But yeah, it's also in Bitcoin, especially I feel like those Bitcoiners that don't run their own node, don't do self-custody, like, they're maybe more prone to that, but it is a huge thing. And I'm thankful that you brought it up, because it is just like so annoying when someone clearly hasn't gone for anything and then says like, oh, Bitcoin is just like a better Tesla, right? Like, it's like so wrong.
Yeah. And if I can add one more thing, I worked for Compass Mining for almost 2 years, and I was recently working with them. And one of the things that I can say, like in the emerging markets, yes, Bitcoin is really, really good. I'm bullish on Bitcoin in the emerging markets because I think it allows people who are unbanked to be able to hold value, or anyone in the emerging markets to be able to own something. A lot of people I'll just talk about South America, very few people own anything. A lot of people, and like it's really hard to buy real estate in Colombia, for example. Like if you're going to buy real estate in the States, what you're going to do is you're going to go to a bank or a mortgage company, and you're going to put down, I don't know, $60,000 and get a $600,000 home, because they're going to be like, okay, this person has some other collateral they can use if they go belly up. They also have, the household income is $250,000. They're going to be able to pay down their mortgage, so they're going to put down 10%. Maybe they put 20%, so they avoid PMI, private mortgage insurance. And point being, 80% of it will be a loan, because there are credits and there are institutions. And I know that people in the States will be like, oh, but interest rates are so high. You can't even do a mortgage in Colombia because the interest rates are so killer. I don't even know. They're like 20 or 30% on a mortgage or something. Like they can get ridiculous, right? Because it's a lower trust society and the way the institutions are made. So what you need to do is, if you want to buy a home, for example, in Colombia, you have to come with the full thing. So instead of, spending the 60 or 120 where you're putting 10 or 20% down for the $600,000 home in Colombia, you got to come with $600,000, right? And just like you can imagine that very few people have liquid $600,000 in the States, even in the middle class suburbs, it's the same thing in Colombia, because the average monthly income in Colombia is $350. Right? So you can do the math, how many years it's going to take you to save up $600,000, and your purchasing power is going down every 3 or 4 years. Point being, the lack of credit in the global South is like a huge problem. So when people can have ownership, even if they own $2,000 of Bitcoin, I'm like, that is awesome, because you own that. And it's something it's actually an asset also. And it's going to continue to appreciate in value. So that's one thing I'm really bullish on. And then the other thing is Bitcoin mining. I brought up that I was working at Compass Mining. Bitcoin mining is really changing the way that like people are able to have electricity access in especially rural areas throughout the global South, because Bitcoin mining provides a reason to basically create energy generation. Right? If you and I are in that village where your girlfriend's from, or any village that's like far out, there's only 400 people, the local energy company is like, okay, let's say we put energization out there and it costs us $4 million, but people are paying, $12 a month for energy, and there's only 400 people. We're not going to get paid back for that initial high, capex, the capital expenditure for like 40 years. Why are we going to do it? But the second you bring miners out to that village and you say, oh, and we're going to have miners that are going to soak up a bunch of energy and we're going to pay for that energy, then they're like, okay, sure, we'll put it out there, because we see that in 5 years, we're actually going to get, paid back our full capex. So that to me is a way that Bitcoin is becoming very powerful. One, in ownership, because I think it's so important to have ownership if you're trying to build wealth anywhere, whether you're in the US, Europe, or Latin America, or any part of the world. And then two, I think Bitcoin mining is actually really changing that. And if you haven't had someone from the Dirty Coin film on, I would make that note, and I can make that intro. But Alana is wonderful. She's out of Puerto Rico. She's Puerto Rican. And she was the executive producer and director of Dirty Coin, which really talks about how Bitcoin mining is changing the way people access energy around the world. And as we know, you need energy to have human flourishing.
It's so funny. I was literally at a club in Bulgaria 2 days ago with her because there was BTC Balkans and she was their speaker, and she's amazing. We went through Bulgaria, we went through the National Museum of History there, and it was an amazing conference in general. BTC Balkans this year, we'll try next year also. And her story and the movie, like I think it's really great. The movie I haven't seen, but now after I talked with her, I'm like, oh, I have to see that movie. Like that sounds really freaking interesting. And this was it's another thing of like you get to know Bitcoiners and they make such cool projects. Like this is another thing that I'm like, Bitcoin is just such a cool community of people that come together and just start things and do things because nobody tells us, because there's no marketing department, there's no CEO, there's nothing. So everyone that ever started anything in Bitcoin, they just did it because they really wanted to have that thing going. And so, Alana I think she's a great example of that with the documentary on Dirty Coin.
Yeah, it's a wonderful documentary. Hopefully you get to see it. And that's how small the Bitcoin world is too. I bring up someone on the pod and you're like, oh yeah, I was with her 48 hours ago.
Yeah, it is. It's crazy. Yeah. But right now it's like a conference kind of a season because like I was, just yesterday came back and 2 days, next I'll fly to Lugano, great conferences there. I have one question to ask each and every one of my guests. And the question is, what can we learn from you besides Bitcoin?
What can we learn from me besides Bitcoin? This is a great question. So I think besides Bitcoin, what can we learn? I think we can learn that if you have, and I'm going to like use Bitcoin indirectly a little bit here, but if you have the privilege, right? Like the story in my head is if you're listening to this podcast, first of all, you have time, and time is a complete luxury, whether you're in transit, maybe you're going to work, wherever you're listening to this. Okay, great. I think everyone on this planet has a privilege, and that looks different for every single person. But if you have privilege, I think we're in a moment of human history where you have to figure out how you can use that privilege to lift up others and do good. And I think that that's something I'm trying to live out every day. And I think about a lot because like you said, you're like, hey, I was raised in Austria. We never wanted for anything. We also weren't super wealthy. We had 2 cars. And the social system and network definitely like allowed you to be better off than most people on the planet, if we're being honest. And I think it's then like, how do you spread that message? And I looked at your Twitter, and it's like, I'm going to do this until Bitcoin's for everyone, right? You're trying to lift up and create a message that's going to lift up other people. So I think that's it. I think that no matter what we're doing, whether you're a podcaster or whether you're working at a company or whether you're an entrepreneur, finding ways to give back and finding ways to be charitable, to be philanthropic, and to think about maybe people that just have a little bit less than you, or whatever that looks like, once again, in your privilege, and just a rising tide lifts all boats. And I think like as humans, we need to, in a time of war, in a time of division, we need to remember that like we're all humans and we're all doing this for the first time, this being living life. And especially if you're Bitcoiners, we're all doing this for the first time because, maybe you're in your second bull market, third bull market, fifth bull market, fourth bull market, maybe it's your first bull market. We just need to remember always to be humans.
And it's super interesting because it just reminded me that I just got asked on that conference again, like how can I keep up with a daily podcast? And I now recently started 4 live streams per week. So I basically do 11 long form formats every single week. And someone asked me like, how can you do that? Like, aren't you like sick of it? Like after like now almost 700 episodes. And I basically gave him the shortcut for motivation. Don't make it about yourself. Do it for something that is bigger for you. And this can be your partner. This can be your family. This can be your son. This can be a Bitcoin community. And for me, I have this sentence, I will not shut up about Bitcoin till it's a base layer of our financial system. I have this since I have like 200 followers on Twitter, and I will keep it in there till like we are there. I don't know what I do then, but this is a live project where I'm like, I probably work on that with all my Bitcoiners that are around here, and like you and like so many at the conference. We probably will work on that all our life till we actually get to a nice state. And so it's really interesting of like, today was a crazy example because I don't know if you can hear, but like my voice is a little bit bad, and like I'm in general like not 100%. And after the ring that tells me like usually I sleep like 80 to 90% a sleep score, and the last 5 days has been between 50 and 60. So I've just like completely sleep deprived. But it's not just about me. It's like, I want to do that podcast anyways, and I want to help other people. And of course I get gain from that. Like there's always like this weird thing of like, oh yeah, like you're not just doing it for that. Like you gain yourself from that. You get on stages. You like that. There's always the ego part also in you. Like everyone has that. But if you only do it for yourself, I don't think you will do it for a very long time. you lack of motivation at some point.
100%. Couldn't agree more.
Really cool. We have an entertainment in the podcast where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without knowing who the next guest actually is. And the previous guest asked the question, how would you explain Bitcoin to a college student that knows absolutely nothing about money? And she that asked the question, Nikki, is one of the really rare guests that are under 20 years old on my podcast.
Wow. Most people don't know that. It's probably the first time ever sharing this publicly with like X community and Bitcoin community. I am an assistant soccer coach at a college up in Boston. So football for all you people from the US and maybe Australia, but soccer. And I talk to them a lot, or they ask me questions about Bitcoin, I should say. I try not to proselytize with them because they're 18, 19, and I know they don't have any money either. But one of the players, he's studying finance, and he gets it. Like he sees, like he understands the idea of scarcity, the finite thing. And I think for other players, I'm just like, imagine owning the best stock in the world, right? That is going to continue to grow over time, but you can also spend anywhere. So like imagine Tesla that you could go buy new Nikes with if you want, or you could hold it for a good amount of time, just like you would Tesla. And then maybe you can get a loan against it to buy a mortgage if that's what you want to do. Or maybe you could, buy a vacation to go to Cancun for 3 days with your loved one. Like, it's basically a stock that you can use to buy things. And like Tesla, I don't care if you have the most Tesla in the world. If you find yourself in the middle of not the United States, because no one cares about it, it's not part of that system. It's not real value, right? Like you could have 1 million Tesla shares and be lost in the jungle of Colombia and be trying to interact with people. They're not going to find it valuable. If you have Bitcoin, you have a much likelier chance to not only have the value of like the international stock or the global stock, which is Bitcoin, but then people may be like, okay, all right, I'll take that. And then you can take my car and like, save yourself. So I just say it's a stock that you can spend and it's the best stock we have.
And the Bitcoin is amazing also because like you can literally download it in most countries on ATMs and stuff like that. There are as of my knowledge, non-Tesla stock ATMs where you can get cash out of from your Tesla stock. But there are Bitcoin ATMs in Austria. I don't know how well they are around the globe, but literally there's like one huge electronics store in Austria who has Bitcoin ATMs at every single store, and it's always like when you go in, you see it, and I'm like, yeah, that's global money. Even if you're stuck there, you can just remember 12 words. I don't recommend brain wallets, but if you remember 12 words, you just like download the money and you have the local currency and you can get out of trouble. You can buy a plane ticket and all of that. Like that's a huge important point. I love that you brought it up.
Yeah, 100%. And then, so now should I ask a question?
I do it usually offline, but if you already have why not? Yeah, it's interesting because like people like it is interesting, and I share that now because it's usually only happening backstage. It's so funny to see the best speakers that are into Bitcoin and just like speaking so well, struggling with coming up with a question. And so I purposely decided of like, I want to give them time as like they should breathe and relax and like give yourself.
Okay. And I understand what you're saying. And I see it all the time. Because I have my own podcast and I have people come on my podcast. And if you keep them in the lane, oh my God, you're going to get the gold. You take them outside the lane and they crumble. So, but I'm ready for this. And I'm very much into crypto and Bitcoin specifically as a philanthropic tool. And I think that you should be donating it. So if it's cool, I want to ask my question on mic because I also want other people to think about it. Is that okay?
Absolutely. 100%.
Okay, so my question is, when was the last time you donated Bitcoin? And if you haven't donated Bitcoin before, that's fine. What would you donate Bitcoin to? What is something that you care about and that you would, say, hey, I'm excited to give my sats for this type of organization? So there it is. And then for everyone else listening, please think about that too. Bitcoin philanthropy and crypto philanthropy is growing like exponentially. Obviously, as the market cap grows, more people are going to have more and they're going to be in profit and they're going to start to use that as a mechanism because it's basically like donating property. It's basically like donating a stock. And I just think once again, the market cap, we've talked about 400 to 500 trillion. There'll be a future where nonprofits only exist on Bitcoin, only exist on crypto rails, probably Bitcoin to be fair, because I think it's going to be the most notable. And I think it's going to be the only thing that's really survives over the long enough period of time. So
I share that belief too. I was very hostile against cryptos actually, just like before I started the podcast. And now I'm a free market maxi. I believe all cryptos will die out, but if they're not, then they clearly found the market space. And Bitcoin is in my comfort zone. And that's where I like bet my money in. But I do believe that like if you see crypto also with stable coins, they will have a big market medium term, like way bigger than it's now. But I always try to look down like 200 years and I'm like why would anyone use anything else than Bitcoin? But it's a whole nother podcast, I guess.
That's a whole nother episode.
But yeah, thank you so much, Jarrett, for being on. Before I let you go, where can people find you, ask you questions and reach out to you?
Yeah, so you can find me on X, and my X name is not the easiest to share. So I'll say go find my podcast, which is Future Signal XYZ on X and across socials, or you can go to futuresignal.xyz. You can see my episodes and also find me there. That's probably the easiest way because my own is very convoluted and everyone spells my name wrong. So yeah, futuresignal.xyz or Future Signal XYZ across socials.
Yeah, double R and double T is like you can make many mistakes in there.
It's very rare. And even though it's Jarrett, right, with the T, Jarrett, people say Jared, and it's a disaster. And it's really nearly impossible. Next time you talk to your editor, who's Colombian, who I'm sure speaks English well, ask them to pronounce my name, and it just sounds like squirrels shooting machine guns when Latinos try to say it. So it's not good.
Love that. Really cool. And I also put, for the people that want to find his complicated Twitter, I just put that in the description so they can just find it with a link. And so, yeah, thank you so much, Jarrett, for being on. And also thank you so much for everyone that is watching and listening for joining us today. As always, I'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Bye-bye.
This content is for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute financial advice.